We are on episode 18 of the show of excellent people talking to other excellent people. I think we can rename our show to that. This episode is brought to you by, just kidding, we don't have any sponsors. It's brought to you by my computer and Courtney's computer. So, and we have a great guest.
Skype. Right?
Yeah, and Skype. Yeah, but we're not sponsored by any of those vendors. So just making it very clear. We have a good guest today. Welcome, Meg.
Hey, how's it going?
So why don't you just give us an intro? Because I always feel awkward introducing other people, and they're always like, well, you missed out as a key thing about what I actually do. So, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure, I can do that. So right now I'm a product lead at Kaggle. And if you haven't heard of Kaggle, Kaggle is an online data science community. And yeah, I love working with online technical communities, including Kaggle and data science. So yeah, that's me.
And you're very prolific on Twitter too.
Yes, yeah, I am a little prolific on Twitter.
and I can't help but notice, obviously, you have your Stack Overflow hoodie on.
Yes.
Yay, Stack Overflow. We're both Stack Overflow alums, but you mentioned like Kaggle was a community and you went to Stack Overflow too, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of bounce between the community for tech.
Yeah, so online tech communities are kind of like my personal brand. That and Twitter, I guess. And yeah, so I've been at Kaggle kind of like discontinuously for I think like 4.7 years, according to like my internal Google profile. But I did spend kind of like in between those years, about a year at Stack Overflow as the product manager for the public Q&A platform.
Awesome. So you have plenty of experience with technical communities. What brought you to that? I'm always curious because different people have different journeys and how they start, right? And it's not a typical career journey where you can look at a resume somewhere and say, oh, this person's going to be great for technical communities. What was your journey there?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So it was really started back in maybe like 2015 or so, where I wanted to be part of like an online data science community. My first job after quitting my PhD was as a data scientist at this like boutique market research firm in Pittsburgh. And I was their only data scientist, and that was a little bit like isolating. I was like first job like out of academia. I kind of like felt like I was making up everything as I was going along, which was like a lot of fun. But I wanted to talk to other people who maybe knew a little bit more about what they're doing, and that's how, or that's why I originally joined Kaggle as like a user. So Kaggle is a great platform for like meeting other data scientists and playing around with data and teaming up with people to participate in machine learning competitions. So I thought it would be a great way to kind of like delve into the world of data scientists and meet other machine learners. And it was great for like a few months. And then I actually, they posted a job ad in like a newsletter a few months after I joined, looking for like a contract content marketing person. So I thought like, hey, what better way to like learn data science and get connected with the community than to kind of like do it a little bit of myself. So I didn't quite get to dabble as a user as much as I wanted to on Kaggle before actually getting paid to work for them. But yeah, I started by just creating like lots of like cool technical content, got to interview lots of like amazing data scientists who were winning machine learning competitions. I got to run their Twitter for a short period. So again, Twitter, part of my career journey or story or whatever. And yeah, it was really that experience that like led me to just fall in love with communities. I just love like being in that space between like the company and the users and being like that direct line and getting to meet really cool people and learn their stories. And yeah, obviously now I build for those users as a product manager at Kaggle today.
So this is really interesting because you mentioned that you were doing kind of an academic focus in data with your like college studies, and then you moved into a traditional like data analyst job. You were kind of isolated.
Yeah.
And then you stumbled upon Kaggle.
Yeah.
Like, which totally probably changed your career directory, right? Like, I could assume I could have seen the alternate story here could have been you could have just been a data scientist, like kind of locked down into that path, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like transformation into a product person, going from a data background? I feel like it's naturally coupled with being a good product manager, but what spurned you forth into that area of interest? What did that look like during your transformation?
It's funny you say like how I stumbled into Kaggle. I feel like my entire career of like I stumbled into everything basically. It was a lot of luck, but also like a lot of just identifying what I was passionate about along the way and kind of like using that to drive my career. And so how it really happened is, I mentioned I was working full time as a data scientist in market research and was just working contract like 10 hours a week, maybe for Kaggle doing content. And during that period, like this would have been like the summer of 2016 or so. That's when Kaggle launched this public data platform. And they had originally started with like just a few like data sets, like maybe 6 or so data sets that they kind of hand curated, but then they launched this new kind of like, they called it BYOD, bring your own data, where anybody could publish data sets on Kaggle. And I just got really interested in like this as, a new platform for Kaggle to make data, available, to anybody who wants to use it in the world. And, I kind of got interested in like, okay, how can we make this successful and kind of promote it from like this, content marketing angle. It was like a new channel, something new that we wanted to promote through the channels that I was working on. And being a data scientist was, interested in looking at like, hey, product analytics, like how many people are using this? Like back in those days, we had like a Slack, I don't know, bot or whatever that triggered every single time somebody published a data set and like would ping me directly. The thought of that now today is, I think my head would explode.
I was gonna say that's not gonna scale today, given the volume.
Yeah, that's not gonna scale. But I got really interested in like, how can we make this like platform successful? And kind of started to bring ideas to developers like, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? And ultimately it led to like, hey, let's hire Meg full time. Like, it ultimately led to like a job offer to work for Kaggle full time. And I think I was then like technically like marketing manager was my title, but it was a little bit also of like maybe like a developer advocacy role in that sense too. And then it was like, again, with like the stumbling, a couple months after that was when Kaggle got acquired by Google. And then, we kind of like stumbled into like, wow, we have so many more resources. We can like hire like crazy. We can, we can get really creative. And so that's when we kind of like staffed up a team of developers to work on the datasets platform. I hired a team of interns to help kind of like seed content and like do some, kind of like more outreach to organizations who wanted to publish datasets, et cetera. And yeah, just more and more my job started to look like, kind of like a mix of developer advocacy, program management, but also, as we staffed up the developer team, started also looking more like product management. So gradually kind of, really kind of came into that role. And I'm really kind of like very thankful for that experience because, I think it's hard to break into your first job as a product manager. And this was like a very nice, kind of set of circumstances for me that was kind of like gradual, like, I went from like 1 developer, 2 developer, 3, 4, instead of like, okay, here's a team of like 35 people, which is what it was, around the time that I left Kaggle to go work for Stack Overflow.
It's an encouraging, point of view because I think that we're seeing people that want to move into the product space and like, how to become PM? I think Dan tweeted something about this the other day. It's like a chicken and the egg problem. It's like, well, you're going to have some PM experience to be a PM. right? Like to get your first gig.
Yeah.
How do you move into that? And in your case, it was like just kind of evolved naturally.
Yeah.
Like you received more and more responsibility, and like you were like, hey, she can lead a team, or she can build out a team for us.
Yeah.
Do you think that what were some of the skills that you feel helped you the most though, to do that, to kind of show, hey, I can be this person that you need? Because I think that if you're going into an organization like Google, they're acquiring the company, they could have just been like, hey, we're just going to put one of our people there, or we're going to hire somebody in, right, to be a product lead or whatever. What skills helped you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I always try to think about like, what skills do I already have that I really want to kind of like flex, and, that I can really, play to my strengths. And, at the time it was my background in data science and quantitative analysis. I also like to think that, my background in social sciences helped me to think, very thoughtfully about, working with communities and, just people. And so those are kind of like the skills that, I wanted to lean into as I, developed as a product manager. And then, that's kind of like one half of it. And then I wanted to also be really thoughtful about, what are the skills that I need to acquire, that are, really going to be necessary for me to be, further successful in this role. And for me, that was, just building trust with developers. And I don't have a background in computer science. I've never been a software developer, which is pretty common at Google for product managers to have that kind of background, at least historically. I think it's changing a little bit now. Yeah, that was kind of like, very initially where I wanted to really, beef up my own kind of like skill sets, at least in terms of communication. I think I've talked about this a little bit on my blog, but really how I love to learn is just through kind of like immersion. I wanted to read all of the design docs that my developers were writing. I wanted to, participate in like, any kind of like the same kind of like onboarding that other developers would do to really understand our like system architecture. And I just kind of like dove head first into trying to understand like, okay, he or she made this decision, like why? Why was that? What were the constraints that, fed into that decision? And just trying to be like, ears, eyes all open, and just kind of like absorbing all of that. I think that's, really what helped me. That, and also just having like great coworkers who were just like very patient and, willing to answer all of my like questions, even if it, they were kind of like inconsequential, like they could just say, who cares? Like, I just need to, focus on my work. But I'm like, no, I want to know so that, the next time, I'm able to kind of like maybe weigh in, on some choices in the future or something like that. So, yeah.
The interesting part is that you're getting it is that something that we discussed a couple times on this podcast is kind of the idea of being a polymath, where you can't shoehorn yourself into this one skill, right? Because it's very easy to just say, oh, I'm a data scientist, I'll help you with data. Oh, you need product decisions, go talk to somebody else. But instead, you kind of start picking up kind of a little bit here, a little bit there, and then you're becoming this kind of a, I don't want to say like jack of all trades, master of none. But it's more of like as a product manager myself, like it is true. You have to know a little bit of everything to be able to kind of piece things together and make good decisions. And it seems like that's kind of the same path that you're describing, where you went through this process of acquiring these many skills, becoming the expert in that, and saying, okay, and now I can see clearly where exactly I'm going with the product. I see why certain decisions are made.
Yeah.
And the more people we have on our show, the more like, and we've talked to several people in product or managing product teams, and it's interesting because I'm starting to see this like a couple different specializations. People either come from like a data background, people are coming from an engineering background. We've had like one that came from a design background, but on the whole, most of them have had like a very solid foundation in something like psychology or like working with people or understanding people. Like that's a recurring theme that continues to come up, like things that had happened in their undergrad studies, right? Like, oh, I went to school for psychology.
Yeah, I mean, I did actually. Yeah.
Literature or whatever. It's like they get this, again, back to Din's point. It's like they get this kind of well-rounded, education and like understanding humans.
Yeah.
Which is honestly, that is one of the hardest parts of our jobs working in product. Communicating to other people, trying to get them on board with your ideas, and then motivating them to actually execute.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so funny. I don't talk about it too often, but I did actually do an undergrad in psychology. That's what my undergrad is in, and I studied kind of specifically individual differences psychology, and things like personality psychology, and basically what makes people different, or in what ways can people be different, and how does that influence how they interact with the world. And I see that as super applicable. But
I think it's so funny too, because maybe the both of you have heard this in the past, where people would like make fun of you if you were like going to school for psychology, like, oh, what are you going to do with that? You're going to be a psychologist? It's like, well, actually, you can go into product, you can manage people.
Totally.
You can do a lot with that. It's very flexible.
Yeah, and I also I have a couple master's degrees in linguistics, where I also studied I studied dialects. I studied phonetics and how language changes and how languages can and are different, and also sociolinguistics, so how people use language in social settings and things like that. And that was also very incredibly applicable. And I think that more linguists should be product managers, or just work in product. So gonna make that plug for.
This is fantastic. You're literally taking the polymath to kind of its most, I want to say positively extreme side of things, where you have just so many sides of the, you have degrees in linguistics, you had a PhD, psychology, you're a data scientist. This is, how can we hire you as a product manager is my next question. I think it gets to that. But with all these things combined, I think, personally, speaking of the product side, Kaggle is fantastic. The other day I was trying to build a machine learning model that would analyze tweets, and that would determine which tweets get more popular based on their sarcasm score, right?
Oh,
and I was like, where do you get a data set that's been labeled? And somebody said, this is sarcastic, this is not sarcastic, and lo and behold, Kaggle is the place, because the first thing that popped up when I searched for it was Kaggle. Cool, I'll create an account and I'll get the data set. So given that you have so much use, the service gets a lot of visibility, because every time I talk about machine learning, data science, Kaggle kind of comes up as oh yeah, just go there. They have either a data set, they have the competitions, they have the people that can help you solve the problem. How do you scale this community and kind of maintain the usefulness of the product? Because when you have more people, I think that's kind of the product management challenge, where when your product is small enough, you have few customers, they'll tell you kind of oh, maybe this would be nice. So you kind of can gauge what idea is good, what is not. When you have millions of customers, all of a sudden now you're okay, who do I listen to?
Right. Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a excellent question. I think it's something that's super pertinent to where Kaggle is kind of in its history right now. I think it's kind of a problem that we're really facing right now. We recently, I think it was this summer, just hit 5 million registered users, and in fact we had an internal competition to predict when we would the date that we would hit the 5 million users. I think I got second place, or maybe third place, but in any case, I think that's a real thing. So there's one thing that's unique about Kaggle, I think, though, is that a lot of it is what we do is not scalable, and the two kind of main things being our competitions platform, totally not scalable. We only have capacity to launch pretty small number of competitions, and the kind of the community that is super highly engaged around competitions is maybe a little bit smaller, but kind of what they produce then is really, really high quality work. Obviously, and we obviously have very strong signal about what is very high quality about what people are creating on Kaggle. So if you're not, for those who may be watching this who aren't familiar, We run these like supervised machine learning competitions where a company posts some kind of like data set and they have some kind of supervised machine learning problem they want to solve. A lot of our competitions lately have been computer vision, so object detection, etc. I think we just launched one that was like some kind of like plant and detecting like if it's like the leaves are diseased or not or something like that. And then users make submissions and those get ranked on a leaderboard according to an evaluation algorithm. And so you can really clearly see like the contributions from these users are, the best kind of like in some objective sense. And what they do is they share notebooks. So notebooks being like Python or R code analyzing the data set. And so commonly, what people would do to find high quality kind of examples of how to do something would be to look at what are the top competitors creating and sharing, and what's getting like the most upvotes and comments and things like that. I call those kind of like social validation about the quality of content that gets produced. So that's pretty non-scalable, I would say, or at least it's not something we're attempting to really scale in a significant way. And then the second is we have our Learn platform. And so we have a pretty small number of like Learn courses that we curate, we create, completely, quote, in-house. And it's on subjects from like computer vision to SQL, beginner and advanced, data visualization, natural language processing, etc. I think it's maybe 15 or so courses, and those are also using our Notebooks platform, and they're kind of just like these hands-on, kind of like really quick bites, quibbies of data science.
Hopefully, it's not going to take the fate of Quibi.
Yeah, no, I don't think. I don't know. It's been one of the most successful parts of Kaggle. And that's also not scalable. We're really thoughtful about the quality of that content that gets that we produce as part of that. We only have a couple of instructors that are creating it, but just sort of like the community that it generates around it and the people that use Learn has been just proliferating. Alexis Cook, she's our head of Kaggle Learn, just shared with me they started creating like forums for people to connect with other users who are taking these Learn courses, and I was totally floored to see like the kind of like the quality and the depth and just the volume of engagement around these communities that are forming among people taking these courses. So I think we've just found these ways to non-scalably kind of like scale our community in kind of like a healthy way. But that said, we are looking for the datasets public datasets platforming is an example of something that is kind of like we consider that more of like our scalable content engine, because anybody can publish a data set and people create notebooks on those data sets. There's some discussion on data sets, etc. And that's where we've had to be a little bit more thoughtful about the quality of that content. So for example, one thing that we did, I think this is a year and a half ago or so, we launched this feature that's like this data set usability rating. And it just kind of like takes some like kind of indicators of quality of a data set and how documented it is, and just kind of distills that to a single number. And that's, on the one hand, it's an incentive to the person publishing the data set to, make it high quality, or just kind of, some people just don't even know what a high quality data set would look like. So it kind of, provides instruction in that sense as well. And then on the other hand, for people who are consuming data sets, that's kind of like at a quick glance, like, okay, this data set has like, these key pieces of information that I need to know that are important for me to ascertain quality. And we did a lot of like interviews with different kind of like data set publishing organizations to kind of get a sense of like what are the right ways to measure quality of a public data set. But yeah, all of that said, like I think this is something more and more we're kind of like wrestling with. How do we maintain quality of interactions in such a large community as we are kind of maybe hitting like a new phase of Kaggle and our growth.
And for any of the listeners that like aren't familiar with Kaggle, I'm on the periphery of data science, so I'm kind of like a consumer, like I monitor it in my day job. But going to Kaggle and like looking at the data sets is kind of fun. There's like all sorts of like really like vibrant and unique things like COVID versus immunization, or there was a competition I saw, like the initial ones, like the Titanic, machine learning from disaster. Like what are some of your favorites that you've seen come out of the community, like data sets that are like fun and memorable for you?
Oh, that's a super good question. Let's see. I love the data sets that like are just really reflective of like the very unique, diverse interests of our community. Like a lot of people will publish data sets that they've like, that's some project that they scraped from the internet. So like one I remember I really liked like earlier in the days of the datasets platform was somebody scraped like ratings from like Beer Advocate. Is that what the website is called? Where you can like rate beers or something like that.
I've seen one for like wine reviews.
Wine reviews,
ramen ratings.
Yeah. So I love all those data sets because they're like, it's just somebody bringing their kind of like personal project. It's whatever they're interested in to Kaggle, and they just want to share it with more people. Like I just think that's really cool.
Pokemon type matchup data. That's like the one that I bookmarked. Like,
yeah.
I don't know why I need this, but I'm gonna need it. I know at some point when I'm talking to my brother about Pokemon.
Nice. Yeah, I think I've also published a few that I like too. I think my most recent data set was like on Dwarf Fortress issues. I don't know if you've heard of the video game Dwarf Fortress, but they have like a public issue tracker, and I follow this like Twitter account that just like tweets issues from the Dwarf Fortress issue tracker because they're always so goofy. Like I don't know, I'd have to look up an example. But they're just like so ridiculous. It's kind of like, patch notes when like Sims gets patched or something, and they're always like, yeah, the Sim can't, I don't know, like whatever. But yeah, so I published the data set of like Dwarf Fortress issues, and it's just cool. Now anybody can use it. It's just awesome. I don't know, I love it.
I think the very kind of important takeaway for me is, and this is kind of goes anathema to what some people might think about community building, where somebody has an idea, they'll bootstrap, I don't know, like a Slack community, a forum or something, and they, focus on, let's just invest a lot of money in like advertising so people can discover it, SEO and all this stuff. You're taking the approach where you're focusing on value, right? Like I'm adding value to the customer. You find data sets, you can experiment with them, you connect to people that can help you. So you're bringing a lot of value to your customers instead of trying to focus on just like, let's bring in more people for the sake of more people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a little bit kind of like idealistic as a product manager, but I personally, like, that's what I'm passionate about, is just like value for our users, and just providing a good experience and just helping them be successful in, whatever they're seeking to do. Like, I think, some of the most rewarding experiences for me are like, this is another thing I think I tweeted the other day. But just whenever I'm sitting in like on UX research interviews, and the number of times that I hear from our users, like, we finish like an hour-long UX study, and at the end they just want to tell like us about how Kaggle changed their life, and like how they got a job, and how they learned something from Kaggle that they applied at work and they got a promotion, or they met somebody who changed their life. And like the number of times that happens at the end of like a user interview is like nothing, like, I don't know, nothing gets me more excited than that. It's just so rewarding.
That is hands down my favorite part of any user study. It's that kind of after the study, because through the study, I don't know why, but no matter how much you tell customers that just be honest, right? Tell us exactly what you think. They will never be fully honest. They'll be like, I tried this button. I guess this is intuitive. But once the recording stops, once you're done, they're like, okay, can I be honest also? Like, I absolutely love this one feature in your product. You're like totally irrelevant, but this is like, yeah, let's keep talking. Like,
yeah, keep going.
Tell me, like, what do you like about this feature? And they can just keep going on, and that's hands down my favorite part about user studies, because you get that kind of unfiltered feedback, unrelated to what you're asking, but then you kind of start parsing it and you realize that, wait a second, there's a lot of valuable information here that they're telling us they did not even plan on telling it, and in a good way. It's not like we're trying to like swindle them out of some information. It's more like their honest feedback about something that is very much unfiltered. It's not kind of constrained by their initial.
Yeah, that's and it's so valuable to me. Like, I mean, I don't care if it's like critical feedback or if it's like, you know, praise is great because then I get to like celebrate my team and say like, hey, great work. But you know, critical feedback too. And like one of the things that I've also enjoyed about, you know, working at Kaggle, and you know, is also something I enjoyed about Stack Overflow, is like being in spaces, you know, shared spaces with the community, and like the opportunities for that really like raw, unfiltered feedback. Like there's so many different like Kaggle Slack communities, and I'm like a lurker in a number of them, and like a moderator in one. And like I try to like, you know, I have to keep a balance, right? But you know, if I see somebody kind of like organically like ranting about something that they hate about Kaggle, like I'll jump in and be like, hey, tell me more, or like, you know, is it okay if I pass this feedback along to my team? Like I love that part of being.
Yeah, and usually when, you know, working at Stack Overflow myself, usually there are gems of truth, right? Like there's some reason that person got so worked up that they're maybe talking about something, or they might be disgruntled or dissatisfied with the product.
Yeah.
That's like a really powerful motivator, and like you should pay attention to those signals, even if they're being maybe interpreted wrong by the audience. Right. Like, I think that was something that was really tough at Stack Overflow for a couple of years, is like managing that and knowing how to strike the right communication, using the right voice to communicate to the community is also really critical, so that they feel like they're being listened to. And I think product development just takes, you know, I felt like we moved really fast at Stack Overflow sometimes, but the community didn't always see it that way, right? It felt like glacial pace to them, and like little things that they've been complaining about for years don't get handled. What is one of your proudest accomplishments over the course of your career? Like something that you shipped and then you got great, you know, feedback from in a user research session, or you kind of close the book on it, right? You ship it and then it's great to hear that went really well. People received it really well.
Yeah. Oh, such a great question. I mean, probably the most immediate thing that comes to mind is like the work that me and my team have done over the last year to make our notebooks product at Kaggle like reliable and stable. We've, you know, really like recently, I think, you know, I think it was like last summer, so yeah, a few months ago now, we shipped some changes that just like completely altered just the perceptions of reliability and actual reliability of the product. That was kind of like paradigm shifting. And I was really proud of that accomplishment. And that was, very rewarding for us, for me and my team, because it's something that, you know, we've really struggled with for as long as we've had our notebooks product. It's just a pretty complex, you know, service. You know, everybody's got basically the equivalent of like a laptop in the cloud, essentially, like worth of compute power, and you know, managing that has been, you know, a challenge. And so, yeah, we recently, like, you know, what I did is, you know, kind of looked at like user feedback, and we collect we collect data like monthly using this survey called HATS. It's like happiness and tracking survey. It's like kind of survey that's pretty standard at Google. Like if you are in a Google product, you'll get like the like pop up occasionally, like if you hang up on Meet, you know, or something. Well, you probably don't use Meet, but you know, you'll get like a HATS survey basically. So we do the same thing at Kaggle, and when I first rejoined Kaggle, I kind of pored over that feedback, and one of my observations was like all of the work that we'd been doing on reliability and stability was great, but it wasn't really visible to the end user because, it took sometimes like 30 seconds to a minute for a session to start. And while it was starting, it was just like a blank screen. And that obviously was just not like a great experience of just like waiting and staring at a blank screen, like what's happening? Is it doing anything? When is my notebook going to be available? So yeah, we shipped some changes that allowed us to, show the notebook editor this. It's basically an IDE essentially. While the VM is starting in the background, so they can see like they can start writing code, kind of like within seconds instead of waiting 30 seconds to a minute. And that was the feedback that we got was like, like I said, like kind of like it was like a paradigm shift for the product. Like, and what we did is we did like a pre-post survey specifically on reliability. So we knew we were going to ship this change. We hypothesized it would be pretty monumental. So we sent like a one question survey about reliability, shipped the change, and then surveyed again. And I think it was like a 33% reduction in people who said the service felt unreliable or something similar to that. And that was, really, really exciting. And now we get lots of feedback about reliability still, but it's changed. It's the type of feedback has completely changed. So instead of saying it's like slow and shitty, they say like, hey, it would be better if you could say save cell state, when I refresh the page, or they give like a lot more kind of like pointed suggestions or real feature requests, that can kind of help us continue to make the service feel more reliable and stable and just higher quality experience. So yeah, it was just like seeing that in the quantitative data, like in the survey, seeing the kind of like qualitative feedback change has been really exciting, because we get to keep working on this problem. And then, 3, like we did this like internal report, but we were excited about it, so we actually shared it externally. So that's another thing I love about my job is I get to kind of like work in public, so to speak. And so we shared the result of this work in like a blog post with our users, and they like chime in on the comments like, yeah, it's great, like this is awesome, like great work, like we really appreciate all the work that your team has done. And that's also pretty rewarding because this is a technical community too. They're data scientists, a lot of them are actual software engineers, and so they appreciate kind of like transparency and just a peek behind like the curtain to see what we're doing. And I think that like helps them kind of appreciate the work that we're doing. And I love being able to share that back with my developers. It makes them feel good too, and so yeah.
Also, like I think this is a gold nugget of knowledge is that in any mature good team, the knowledge that you get from your customers is shared. It's not something that you silo for yourself, or you like, as a PM, I'm the one that knows the customer needs. All of you don't care, right? Like, you want to involve engineers, you want to involve your data scientists in knowing what are people asking for? Like, how do you democratize knowledge? To me, this is the worst thing is when a team tries to hoard the knowledge and say, no, this one person knows everything, nobody else.
Yeah, that's not even an option. Yeah, I mean, so many good ideas come from anywhere and everywhere. You have to kind of like set up an ecosystem where, if I just want to share, like, this is a problem. I think this is, maybe I have an opinion that this is the biggest, most like highest leverage problem we can solve. But I don't have to come up with every solution. I didn't come up with the solution in this case. Yeah, 100%. Like another thing that we love doing too is like every like feature launch that we do, we typically do write like a little blog post or something. And yeah, it's often like the developers, the designers themselves that write the blog post. And so they get to kind of like have that opportunity to like interact directly with users and kind of like be responsive to feedback. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's not quite as intense at Stack Overflow, where that was a bit of a scary experience. I think, Kaggle's community is a little different.
I like being able to talk to you because I think, we didn't work on the same team as Stack Overflow, but I think one of the things that we did pretty well at Stack Overflow is have access to data, whether you were an engineer or designer or a PM. Like, I had the same dashboard that I could go query as anybody else. And once I was trained on that, like I could use it to my advantage at any point. And I was able to make better decisions. I mean, there were numerous times I was able to make better decisions on a feature because I didn't need a very specific query to make a call. It was a guess. And this is probably something that product teams overlook, maybe at smaller companies. I'm not sure how common this is because my experience isn't every experience, but that experience has contrasted with like my Microsoft experience where it's not democratized. And it's really hard to get data. And it's actually, that becomes very frustrating. So how do you, if you can't, I mean, I understand if you can't divulge everything, but like, how was that done on your team?
Oh, that's such a great question. I'm excited about it because so at Google, we have like this whole 20% project thing or whatever. Like somebody could spend 20% of their time on some passion project or some other initiative or whatever. And as a product manager, it's more like 220% time, but whatever. Mine happens to be evangelizing product analytics on our team. So I'm like I think it's like called a community contributor to our product analytics team. So, and basically my whole job is to like socialize like how to use the tools to, use data to answer questions across our team and make people feel like empowered. That's really important for Kaggle because we're a pretty small team. We're like between 40 and 50 people. And we only have 2 people working on, 2 people whose like job is internal, like business analytics or data science or whatever you want to call it. And so, having access to data and knowing how to use the tools and, getting familiar with like best practices and things like that is super important to our team. Just because we don't have the resources to kind of like farm that off to another team.
Now, is that built into like the new team members like onboarding? Do you introduce them to the different tools that are being used, or like the expectation, right? Like here's the floor, and this is kind of what we're going to expect from all of our team members to be at least cursory involved, like it exists.
So we have like I would say like we're kind of like working on developing that kind of culture. And so we have a few things that are kind of like best practices that we're trying to inculture, like any feature launch that's, larger than like X like effort or something has to come with, some queries or, we have to like publicly share what were the goals, and here's, a dashboard or some queries that, we kind of pair with any launch announcement that anybody on the team can kind of like inspect and kind of take a look at. Just trying to think of some other things. I mean, I'm a big like user of like templates and things like that, just to kind of like reduce my own cognitive load. So I've also baked in some certain things around like analytics and setting success metrics into our PRD, product requirements doc template that we use, that sort of thing. It's just something I'm very like early days trying to like start on my team to kind of like better socialize people. One of the things that I actually just started doing last week, which I also tweeted about, was doing like analytics, like office hours every Friday, and it was like an idea that I got from Dr. Julia Silge at Stack Overflow. Actually, she did like a weekly R office hours where people could kind of just like bring their questions, and then they would work on some problem in R together every week. And then that's all kind of like documented. And then, I think she would send like an email out to the team, like with like, hey, here's like the research questions we looked at, here's the results. And they were always beautiful, ggplot visualizations that she would share. So I'm trying to do like this a really similar thing on my team with this like analytics office hours. We use this tool called Gather, where it's like it's like screen sharing, but you're in like a physical like town kind of like, it's like you're in like a pixel art, you're like in a video game basically, and then you can like kind of like co-locate yourself with people, so you kind of like walk. So we like set up a space to do the workshop or the brown or the analytics office hours, and then we could like then physically like break off into small groups to kind of like work through problems together.
It's like data science office hours in Animal Crossing.
Yeah, basically, yeah. Which I have also had meetings in Animal Crossing, so yes.
Which is fantastic.
But yeah, so that's like one way that I'm hoping to like, yeah, in the last like, well, this is like the first office hours, but we talked about everything about like how our A/B testing framework works internally and kind of like sharing that knowledge with the team. We talked about like how to use Google Analytics data to look at traffic by like what screen sizes people are using when they visit our site. How to look at like different like client events, like how to use BigQuery. Like we touched on like so many things, and it was like with people from like all across the team in different kind of roles. And so yeah, I'm hoping that's like another way that we'll be able to kind of like socialize and kind of knowledge share.
Right.
For our listeners that are interested in kind of getting a start in data science and understanding it in the web space, where would you push them to? Like, what would you say to them? Hey, like I'm working in, maybe they're a web designer or a PM that's not super data heavy. Where do I start? Right?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I don't know if this is the best place to start. This is like where I like instinctively like always want to suggest people start, which is just like find something that you're personally interested in or passionate about and develop your own hypotheses or kind of like research question. I think that is kind of one of the ways that learning can be the most motivating for folks, is to kind of like make it kind of tied to something you're personally interested in. So I think that's like where I would start if I were learning, is like, well, what kind of like problem seems adjacent to the space that I want to get into, but also kind of intersects with maybe some interest that I have.
Is it hard to get data, like get raw data sometimes? Like, you mentioned scraping, right?
Yeah.
That might be a technique that somebody's not familiar with, or, it's like, I want to know every single, Kamehameha that was done in Dragon Ball Z. How the hell would I figure that out? Other than watching every episode and like counting them. Right? Is there an image, right? Is there a way to like fly through the videos and like do a screen capture and it counts them, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's like cool ways to do that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think finding like examples of somebody who's done maybe something really similar to what you want to do. So maybe it's not like capturing every Kamehameha from like a Dragon Ball Z episode. I don't know how many times that actually happens in an episode. I don't know. In a season, like maybe maybe you find somebody who does that, but it's like Homer Simpson saying dough in like an episode of Simpsons or something like that. And then I think like you can learn a lot just by like, if you try to tackle a whole problem start to finish when you don't know how, like, so many parts like that are required to accomplish it, like that can be like really, really overwhelming. And so it is actually not a bad strategy to take something, like fork it and then like repurpose it, because then you're just maybe learning like the data collection aspect.
Kind of reverse engineering it.
Yeah. Or maybe like, depending on what you're forking or how you want to, kind of apply it to what you're doing. Maybe, you could be learning like data collection. You could be learning like data labeling. You could be learning. So it's all like, I think that's like a good strategy, because then you're able to kind of like take it in like smaller chunks too. Another kind of like strategy is also to like, not necessarily like copy and then kind of like work without like inspecting anything of what you've copied, is to kind of actually go through the motions of like either, literally just rewriting the code yourself, like the actual like muscle memory and motions of like, working through something, even if you are like in the end just copying something, is can be one way to kind of like absorb, but then also like modifying it, just like taking like small bits and then changing things here and there and seeing what happens.
I'm not gonna lie, that's how I learned programming. That's exactly. I had books and I would just literally copy paste snippets and see what it does, and then if it broke, I was like, all right, what happened? Let me go dig in, and then you kind of start getting like it starts clicking.
Yep.
Do you have any YouTube authors or creators out there that are doing things with data that would be like awesome if you were trying to break into it, like understanding things like predictive analytics or like machine learning? It's like all that stuff, you can get overwhelmed with it if you're trying to get into data science. But like you mentioned, if you find the interest and then like just kind of having it can be overwhelming to know where to start, right? And so are there other people out there doing things that you love that you think would be great for beginners?
I don't really have a whole lot of. I don't have an answer to this one.
I want to say Kaggle. Just go to Kaggle and start experimenting. I mean, seriously, that's with the breadth of data sets that you have. Like, why wouldn't you? Like the example that I brought up earlier, where I was building a ML model, and that is kind of, you start with an idea, and then you kind of start questioning, okay, where do I get the data? Maybe I'll start looking at Kaggle. Then you run into a notebook that somebody put together with something very similar. You're like, oh, cool. Maybe I can just repurpose that. Very serendipitous. And I feel like that works typically. Like, I don't know about you folks, but for me, it's much easier to learn when I actually get more of a hands-on approach versus I'm watching a YouTube video of somebody talking, and then I'll be like, cool, thanks. Now I know what NLP is. Instead of like, let me just try coding something up and see what happens. But it's also interesting that what you're describing is Kaggle does so much for the data science community. Do you ever feel like it's, well, maybe not even feel, do you actually see anyone kind of taking advantage of the free capabilities and kind of doing their own Bitcoin mining and notebooks and stuff like that?
Yes. Definitely. We definitely see that. Definitely see abuse. But we benefit some great internal, like Google tooling to kind of deal with that. So we have a great team that's done a lot to kind of like mitigate some of that. Or most of it, fingers crossed. It's interesting because we also see people using it for things like, what was the, like, I don't know why, but SETI is the example, like, or using it to like calculate digits of pi or something like that, like.
Right, super expensive calculations.
Yeah, exactly. So using it. So we also see a little bit of that, and it's like, I feel bad kind of like banning those kind of like a little bit, not quite Bitcoin mining, but
But I mean, somebody has to pay for the compute, right? Because compute is not free, and it comes out of someone's bill at the end of the day. And
don't we have that same issue at Microsoft then?
I think that's generally an issue with any kind of platform that offers compute. I'm pretty sure if you go to Google Colab, right, where they have the notebooks, right? You have the same thing where the moment you give somebody the ability to execute code in the browser, you can talk about literally any platform, be it Java, .NET, Python. If you give them a runtime, people will try to push it to its limits, and sometimes the limits are, it's quite pricey. Yes. So it's kind of, I don't know, reassuring to hear that this is not an isolated problem, and this is something that even at the scale of Kaggle, I mean, you still have people that will try to kind of circumvent the guardrails. But that being said, kind of, there's a lot of work that goes into Kaggle. There's a lot of things that you're responsible for. How do you balance out? Because as a product manager, you have to do a lot of things. You have to talk to customers. You think through kind of the features for the product. You have to talk to engineers. What's your strategy to just having this balanced approach to kind of making sure that you have coverage of everything?
Yeah, that's a super good question, and it's becoming especially pertinent as I'm becoming responsible for more things at Kaggle, recently. So I had been focused pretty much solely on our notebooks product, but now I'm kind of like expanding to be responsible for more just product for the community side of our business. And yeah, I mean it's like prioritization for anything, like where are the things that are like urgent, need to happen now, where are the things that are urgent but can happen later, or lower price that eventually, and then kind of like being ruthless with things that I can cut or delegate entirely. So there's like a lot of things I could be doing that would be for me, like maybe super fun. Like I love like product analytics and could spend hours like writing queries, and like I'm just so curious about everything. I could spend tons of time doing that. But yeah, identifying those things that like are gonna have diminishing returns for my hours spent, and yeah, it's tricky. I think like one of the things that I think I've been looking to kind of like help with that too is like how can we just as an organization make decisions more efficiently? Right now, we have a little bit of like siloing going on with our product teams. And so there's a lot of folks that are kind of like recreating the wheel on their own team, whether that is like strategy or, how they, kind of their processes for product development, et cetera. And so one thing I've been working on recently is like, what are things that we can kind of like, if we take them up to a level, a level above, how can we kind of then like scale, more widely in a way that can help people, not have to attend like 5 different sprint meetings, but one, so that's like another way I think that I'm trying to improve, the cost of like making any decision just generally across the team.
Fantastic. Well, this is great advice and a lot of good insights. I literally feel like we're chatting between friends because I have so many more questions and this is like a fireside chat. But I know that we're at time and we're recording today a little bit later than usual. So I want to be respectful also of Courtney's time zone. So Meg, where can people find you if they want to learn more about the work that you do, your Twitter account, of course?
Yeah, so you can find me, you can follow me on Twitter at Megan Risdal, and you can find me on Kaggle at kaggle.com/mrisdal, and then I have a blog at meg.dev.
Wow, this is a good name. I when the .dev domain was still coming out, I was like, I don't need it, whatever, I have my .com. But I was like, I can get a 3-letter one. This is good.
Everybody be sure to go follow Meg on Kaggle so you can watch her Dwarf Fortress issues tracker.
That's right. Yeah, yes. You can follow me on Kaggle. Yes.
And you recently had an article on the NVIDIA blog.
Yes, I did.
I'll make sure to link that as well. That's, if there's any kind of proof that you're collaborating across companies, even not even just Kaggle itself. So this is fantastic. Congratulations on being published there.
Yeah, thank you.
And at that, hopefully we'll get to chat with you soon on some other episode. We're wrapping up, this is pre-Thanksgiving, so we're getting into the Christmas zone. And I'm guessing a lot of people will be out, but once the new season rolls out, season 2 of the work item, we'll have you come in and talk to us more about the awesome things that Kaggle is shipping.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Meg.
Yeah, thank you guys.